Welcome. So, we're going to be looking at plank in this practice in a few different ways. But plank is one of those postures that not only is very strength building, but it also requires knowledge about how to integrate the body together so that you know where the body is in space. And so that's really our primary goal. The strength is, of course, a secondary benefit. But what we're really looking for in this practice is, do you know where your body is in space? And can you feel the different aspects of what makes a plank? And so to get started, we're going to lie on our backs so we can warm up a little bit, and then we will find some plank positionings. So go ahead and lie down. If you want a blanket underneath your head, that's fine. I've got my two blocks around the top of my mat just in case I need them or want them. If you are someone who has wrist stuff, blocks can be super helpful for this practice, even multiple blocks. So, if you need to pause the video and go grab props, go ahead and do so. Okay. So we're going to start with the knees bent, feet flat on the ground, hands resting somewhere on the belly. And then as you start to drop in, let your shoulders relax down towards the floor. And that might require a little bit of conscious chest widening or letting go so that your upper back feels really broad and as kind of flat like a pancake, right? As flat as it can be. If you'd like to close your eyes, you can do that. If you want to keep the eyes open, that's totally fine. So, the first thing as you're lying here on the floor is just to check in and see what speaks first. Right. And when I ask the question, what speaks first, what I'm really interested in is, what's the first thing that kind of pops up into the mind? And if you're someone who spends quite a bit of time on the floor, you may be very familiar with the sensations that are in your body of what's contacting the floor, or what may be holding some tension, or what may be starting to release tension, sort of melt. If, on the other hand, you're someone who is a little bit new to the lying on the floor practices, then this might feel a little hard in terms of not soft, right? Because you're lying on it on the ground. Right? You might notice that there might be some apprehension about, how to get up. Um, Maybe some thoughts about what it feels like to have something quite firm supporting your body. And does your body actually really like that? Or does it have a little bit of tenderness? And so as you're starting to notice things, or maybe you have a hard time hearing kind of what the body has to say, which is fine, right? That's part of the practice. You just kind of start to notice for yourself, is there a way to allow the floor to support your body more fully? And could the breath be the path to get to that point? And so in these next few moments, just kind of notice, right? Especially if you had a lot of information or no information from the body. If you sort of had that kind of middle, sort of like, yeah, I feel some things, but nothing super loud or super, super quiet, then this may be a little different for you, right? But if you had big sensations of like, oh, my back really hurts, or my feet really hurt, or oh, my neck feels like it's finally getting some rest, or if you're someone who was like, I'm laying on the floor and I have no idea what I'm supposed to be thinking or feeling, like, just please tell me what I'm supposed to think or feel, right? See if as you take a few breaths and you really focus on air coming in and going out, see if you can feel if that feels easeful or if it feels rigid or foreign. And we would like the breath to feel somewhat easeful in this position, right? Or very well supported by the floor, hopefully. There doesn't need to be an enormous amount of effort to sustain this particular posture. And so we would like to see and to allow the breath to be relatively easeful to sort of match the necessary effort that the body is being asked to produce, right? As we get more into plank, the breath may be a little bit more challenged, a little bit more um, manipulated, or pulling breath in and pressing breath out to get a certain amount of stability, right? But here, see if there's a way to just to sort of allow breath to come in and out of the body with as little resistance as possible. For some of you, that resistance will be at the belly, right? So you may have to actually let the abdominal wall relax for a bit, and that's great. For some of you, that will be in your rib cage around the individual ribs or around the internal organs. And for others, it will be around the neck and jaw complex, right? The initial entrance point of the air, right? Is there a lot of clenching of the teeth, or is there a lot of congestion from who knows what, right? Maybe it's a little bit of a cold, maybe it's allergies, maybe it's just what the sinuses are doing today. And so just trying to find a little bit more ease, a little bit more breathiness, quite literally, a little bit more air. And a little bit more sort of trust in the floor to give you the support to create ease in the breath. Now, hopefully, as you're on the floor here, you can kind of have a sense that the floor is giving you a relatively flat platform, for lack of a better word, for your spine to align on. And so, can you feel that your head is relatively in line with your shoulders? This, of course, is kind of dependent on both your body proportions, but also if you chose to have a blanket underneath your head. So we're talking like relatively like ishes in this one. So is your head kind of aligned ish with your shoulders? And hopefully the shoulders are aligned with the pelvis, right? Because they're both on the floor. And you might notice that there is a slight curve in the lower back that comes off the floor, unless you're someone who presses your lower back down. And so, see if you can find a little bit of a curve of your lower back off the floor, right? It might feel like you're arching your back a smidge, and that's okay. And so far we've built plank from head, shoulders, and hips, right? In alignment, in a relatively kind of quote unquote straight line, right? We have curves as it goes from the head through the shoulders to the pelvis, but the energy of the alignment is linear, right? We're not dropping anything out of that line or that line up. And so we're going to take your right leg and extend it onto the floor. And as you do that, see if you can keep the leg active. So you're going to flex the toes back and reach your heel away from your head. And hopefully you can, without too much discomfort, sort of straighten through the knee. And you're straightening through the knee through activating the front of your thigh, your quadricep muscle, right? That's what pulls the knee upwards in order to lengthen the knee joint. And as you do that, if you do the lengthening of the knee without the partnering of engaging the glute, it's possible that you're going to pull your lower back into more of an arch off the floor. And so you might actually try that. Straighten your knee so much that your lower back sort of tips off the floor, right? And almost pulls your pelvis down away from your rib cage. And then see if you can bring your spine back into neutral. And that happens potentially from two different places. You might feel a little bit of glute engagement in the back of the buttocks to match the thigh. And then you might also feel a little bit of abdominal toning. And so just kind of notice like which one rings more true for you. Or did you push your left foot into the floor to rock your pelvis back? That left foot's not going to be there for much longer. And so see if you can find a way to engage the right quad with the right glute ab, partnership, so to speak. Just notice what that feels like to you. What feels really accessible, what feels a little bit more challenged. And then we'll switch sides. We're going to bring the right leg back up, extend the left foot out, flex the left toes. And a lot of us in plank tend to allow the knees to sort of collapse a little bit. And so what's nice about doing sort of like this upside down version of plank is that you really get to experience things without an enormous amount of gravitational load. And so see if you can engage your quad, pull your left toes back so that you're really pushing your heel away from you. And then notice if you engage the left quad without anything else, and you may not, it's interesting, like you may not be able to engage that left quad without anything else, depending on your body's particular habits. But if you were able to sort of isolate that quad and really press the thigh down, your pelvis would tilt because there is an aspect of one of your quadricep muscles that pulls the pelvis into this tilting position. It's called an anterior tilt, and you don't need to know that, but if you're kind of interested in how your body moves, this is an important action. And so then, right, you're going to keep your quad nice and engaged, and then try to make your pelvis neutral again. And it might be a combination of kind of lifting the lower belly up, right? That will pull the pubic bone back towards the navel and kind of give you some support there. You might also feel some glute engagement of making the buttock a little bit more firm, because that also tilts the pubic bone up a little bit and helps to balance the engagement of your thigh. Now we're going to keep the left leg there and join your right leg with it. And so you'll notice that if you were someone who was using your right foot to assist you, you will no longer have that assistance. And so for a second, just let everything relax into Shavasana, right? You can even bring your arms out to the side if you would like to. And just going to notice what you feel, right? Do you feel like your lower back is arching a little bit? Do you feel like your shoulders are rounding away from the floor? And then let's start building the plank by putting your hands on your pelvis. So you're going to find your hip bones with your hands, one on each side. And then flex your toes so that they're pointing straight up to the ceiling. And then as you pull your toes back towards your kneecaps, your heels are going to reach away from your pelvis. And just kind of notice how does that feel to you? Some of us have more ankle mobility or bendability than others. And you just kind of notice, does pulling your toes back to your knees feel really difficult, right? Or are you someone who has some kind of stickiness in the ankle joint? And then start to engage your thigh. So thinking about pulling your kneecaps up the thigh, we really want to make sure that we're not slamming the kneecap back into the knee joint. And so if you can feel the difference, if you push your kneecaps down towards the floor, that is something that I think would be a little bit more jamming, so to speak. But if you think about pulling your kneecaps up into your thighs, there's a little bit more activation of muscle when that happens. And it gives a directionality to that support in the muscle activation. And so then you've got your thighs engaged, your kneecaps are pulling up into the thigh itself. And then you want to feel a little bit of the glutes engaged because that will balance some of the thigh and a little bit of lower belly. And this could be your plank, especially if you're someone who's newer to this relationship between quads, glutes, and abs, to how to stabilize or manipulate the pelvis this could be really good, right? And so go ahead, let it relax again. I think it's important to understand that movement and posture is not, it's not a thing. And what I mean by that is you arrive at a certain posture by understanding the relationships of the building blocks of that posture. So let's take plank again. So you're going to flex your feet back. So that's one part, right? That's like kind of part A, so to speak. And then what we're really talking about at the moment is the relationship of how to place your pelvis when we think about the pelvis in relationship to the spine and the thigh. So it's kind of a trio, so to speak, of pelvic stability. And so as you pull your toes back, because you could absolutely do this with your toes pointed, and it change is a variable, but it doesn't really change dramatically the pelvis thigh spine relationship and what our goal is, which is neutrality. And so you can choose your foot position, that's fine. And then can you engage the quads? Can you engage the glutes? Can you engage the abs? And have those working in kind of harmony or equanimity to give the pelvis a sense of stability, potential mobility, right? You could decide to engage the quads more, relax the glutes and the abs and come into a back arch. Or you could, ask the abs and the glutes to work even more, relax the thighs, and you come into a tucked pelvis or a cat spine, right? And so we're saying this is stable and neutral, but we have choices of where to move from here, right? And then on top of all of that, regardless of what your toes are doing, they can be pointed or flexed, but you definitely have your quads, your glutes, and your abs on. Can you still breathe? Right. And especially when we're finding some of the stability in the quote unquote core, which we're going to, I'm sure, do deep dives into the core at some point because I have very strong opinions about what it is. But for our purposes right now, if we're thinking about stabilizing the thigh to the pelvis to the spine with the quads, the glutes, and the abs as the most simple version, can you have that on and breathe? Now, you might be someone who also feels a lot of gripping around the pelvic floor, kind of the anal area or kind of the front genital area. And, we want to try to not overdo that as much as possible. And you might start to feel a little bit of inner thigh engagement, which is also is possible to be activated here. But again, we don't want to overdo that either. And so we're really focusing on thighs, glutes, abs, right? That trio at the moment. And you could even like put your arms up to the ceiling as if you were pressing the ceiling away. And this plank is a great place to work when you're tired or when you feel like you need to reestablish connectivity. If when we're working in a traditional plank, if you can no longer feel this, lay down on your back, return to this, and do exactly this kind of trio of activation. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, let the body relax into Shavasana. Just kind of let everything kind of drop into the floor. You can let your legs flop out to the side. The arms could come onto the torso or be out to the side as well. And this trio is going to be what we're going to be looking at pretty much throughout the rest of class. So I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record for the remainder of class. But that habit of can you feel things all happening at once in order to create placement is really important. Okay. So let's go ahead and roll to one side, come up onto hands and knees. If you are someone who has sensitive knees or likes a blanket underneath your knees, you can go ahead and put one of those there. If you're someone who has sensitive wrists, I would recommend grabbing a couple blocks, putting them on their lowest height, and then walking your hands up on top of the blocks, letting the fingers drape over the front edge, because that will take off quite a bit of pressure on your wrist joint. You can even have the hands farther in front of you so that they're at an angle, because we're going to be doing quite a bit of weight in the hands for this practice. And so take care, of your joints. So we're going to start by coming into a cat spine. So you're going to round your back. You're going to look down kind of towards your inner thighs. And as you round your back and look down towards your inner thighs, can you feel what's making this position? Okay. Do you feel a sense of pressing your arms down and into the floor or blocks? Do you feel a kind of hollowing of the chest to make the shoulders go wider, right? And that could even be felt along the sides of the ribs. And do you feel a little bit of that kind of abdominal lift and the gluteal engagement that helps round the lower back? And then we're going to go into the other position. So cow spine, go to arch the back. Maybe look forward. You might be able to look up towards the ceiling at this point, but I would take care just to kind of move into your back bends a little bit gently. And so here we've got the benefit of gravity. The gravity is helping the gravity, as you know, that's interesting. We have gravity helping us here find this back bend. And so as you do this, notice how you sort of have to release the glutes and the buttocks so that the pelvis can roll forward over your thighs. You almost have to relax the belly a little bit. Now, if you are someone who has difficulty with back pain, it can be helpful to keep a little bit of hugging of the low belly up towards the organ. So you're not tucking the pelvis, but just a tiny engagement, almost like you had a kind of a tight lower waistband hugging up just to give your back some support. If you have a relatively healthy and non-irritated back, you can think about letting the belly really stretch open in this back bend and see what that feels like. Let's go back to cat spine, round the back, drop the head. See if you can re-engage the glutes and the low belly. And here, because the knees are bent, the quads are not quite as easy to feel, right? But we will absolutely get back into them, so don't worry if you were worried. Inhale, cow spine. Again, find the lengthening or the letting go of the gluteals, the buttock muscles. Maybe stretch the belly, maybe start looking up a little bit higher if that feels interesting to you. And then one more time, cat spine round, glutes, abdominal. So that's what's kind of helping tuck your tailbone or your sits bones down, right? Rocking the pelvis. There are other muscles, of course, that we can get into, but we're kind of trying to take the simplest route at the moment. Okay. And then come into your cow spine, arching the back, letting the glutes let go, and letting the belly stretch as much as it can. Okay, and then let's come into our first downward facing dog. So if you were having your hands on blocks, go ahead, take the blocks off to the side and bring your hands onto the floor, tuck the toes, lift the hips, keep the knees bent and come into your downward facing dog. As you arrive in your down dog and you're sort of looking back at your feet, just kind of make sure your feet and your knees look relatively parallel and symmetric. Think about pushing through the hands to move the chest back towards the thighs. That's going to start to open the armpits a little bit. And see if you can breathe here. All right. We're going to walk the feet forward to the top of the mat. So go step by step, bend your knees as much as you need to get the feet all the way up to the top of the mat. Blocks could come back up underneath the hands if that's helpful or if that's just comfortable at this point in practice. Bend the knees, lay the torso down onto the thighs, let the head drop. As you inhale, come into a flat back, chest moves forward. As you exhale, fold the head back down. Standing forward bend, Uttanasana. Again, flat back, chest moves forward. The knees could be very generously bent here. That would be fine, or they could start to straighten. Exhale, fold all the way back down. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. And exhale, fold. Next time you inhale, we're going to sweep the arms out to the side, all the way up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. And then as you exhale, take the arms out to the side, down by your hips, mountain pose. So just standing tall. All right, so let's do like a couple half sun salutations. Inhale, lift the arms. Push the feet down to get nice and long from fingertip to heel. Exhale, dive forward over the legs. Arms go out to the side as you dive all the way forward. Drop the head at the bottom. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold all the way back down. Inhale, reach your arms out to the side, up to the ceiling. Urdhva Hastasana, or upward hand pose. Exhale, mountain pose. And this might feel slow too. That's okay. Just kind of keep flowing through it. Inhale, lift the arms. Excuse me. Exhale, dive forward with the legs. Hands go out to the side, then down to the floor. Helps protect the lower back a little bit. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold all the way back down. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side and up to the ceiling. Upward hand pose. Exhale, mountain pose. Okay, so let's stay in mountain pose for a second and see if in mountain pose, what do you feel? Right, it's a very open-ended question. So just kind of notice, like, what's the first thing that pops into your head? And then without using your hands yet, can you feel if your legs are active? Again, it's kind of vague, but let's take it a little more specific. Can you feel if the thighs are engaged or relaxed? For mountain pose, you don't actually need to engage your legs in your thighs if you don't want to, right? Our bones are shaped in such a way where the quads don't have to be on, right? Unless you have a knee shape that is more bent than straight. If you're hyperextended, you absolutely don't need to have your thighs on to stay upright. And that's a good thing, right? If our quads had to work all day long, we'd be very tired. But see if there's a way to activate them. So if you thought about pulling your kneecaps up the thigh muscles gently, not again, not locking the knees back, but drawing the thighs or the kneecaps up, just kind of notice what that does. And then in relationship to that, is there a very gentle, and again, these aren't what we call like max contractions. It's not using the muscle at all of your might. It's just sort of gently getting the muscles to start turning on. Is there a little bit of hug of the lower belly? Again, it's not a tuck, just a little hug of the lower belly and a little glute activation, kind of like your plank. See if you can keep that. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side and up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. And as you reach the arms up to the ceiling, can you think about pressing your heels down into the floor as you lift the thighs up or the kneecaps up by engaging your quads, and have a little engagement of the buttocks and a little engagement of the abs, and breathe. And all of a sudden, this posture becomes kind of really interesting and a little bit more of a posture in its own right and less of a transition. This is also plank position, right? There's a theme. We know that that's happening. All right, so let's dive forward over the legs. Hands go all the way out to the side and down to the floor, standing forward. Bend the knees as much as you need. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, bend the knees, step your left foot back, low lunge. Okay, so here we are in sort of what could be considered our first more traditional plank-like position. You're going to grab your blocks and place them up on their highest height so you get as much room as possible. Again, fingers draping over the front just to help the wrists have more space. And then in this position, press the hands down as if you were in your full plank, right? And their full plank would have both feet back if you're unfamiliar with what plank is. And so you're pressing your hands down. So that's the thing that's keeping your chest aloft. And then on your left leg, it's so nice. We can just do this with one leg to start. On your left leg, do you feel like your left knee is kind of bent? I see this a lot in students and patients. I see a lot of wilting back legs. And so see if you can feel the left thigh engage. And again, if it engages too much, it'll actually lift your hips up, right? Kind of towards downward dog. And so your left thigh is engaged, but now we're going to match that engagement with a little bit of glute to help keep your pelvis in line with your shoulders, right? And so there's a lot of sort of, I love the panini of this, right? The kind of sandwiching of the thigh up into the thigh bone and the glute down into the thigh bone so that you have equal and opposite efforts. Because your right leg is forward, there's less of a need for the abdominals to be active. But you can see if they could be active because again, that right foot's not going to be there forever. And so it's kind of nice just to turn the abs on a little bit, press the arms down a little bit more, and just kind of feel what that feels like. And for some of you, this will feel like a lot. And for others, you'll feel sort of like, well, let's get to it. Let's get to plank. But is it possible to stay curious about in these preparatory postures? Can there be such a clear activation and a clear understanding and a clear perception of where you are in space that this becomes an advanced practice? Okay, we're going to step forward. So bend the back knee a little bit, push off of it, come to stand in your standing forward bend, Uttanasana. Knees could be bent or straight, doesn't matter. As you inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. As you exhale, fold all the way back down. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Push the heels down, engage the quads up, match that engagement with a little bit of glute and a little bit of abdominal, but still breathe, right? If we engage the abs so much, we eliminate breathability. And so it's that fine tuning of how much is the right amount for you. Exhale, dive forward over your legs, standing forward, bend, Uttanasana, head drops. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, bend your knees, step your right foot back, low lunge. Okay, so again, blocks are on the highest height. Push through the arms so that you're preparing them. Engage the back thigh so that the knee is lifting both away from the floor, right? Because that happens. But what you're really thinking about is pulling the kneecap into the bulk of the thigh muscle towards the pelvis. So you got that directionality of almost hugging the leg bone in and up into the pelvis. And then match that with a little bit of kind of the right glute pressing down towards the floor. So you've got that sandwiching effect on the thigh bone. And then even though your left foot is in between your hands, can there be a sense of the arms being the primary support of the shoulders and the chest and the low belly lifting up to help support the low back? Breathing here. And this makes low lunge just such an amazing posture, right? There's so much to do here, so many things to keep track of. And as we hold, some muscles will start to shift and maybe slide out of engagement. And the attention to the thigh, to the glute, to the belly, to the arms, to the breath, that coordination is really what we're looking for here. It's what makes low lunge interesting. All right, so let's step forward, bend the back knee, step the right foot forward to meet the left foot, fold forward. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold all the way back down. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Push the heels down, feel the thighs lift, the low belly lift, the glutes engage. And then this time, let's take a side bend. So your right hand is going to go down to the right thigh. Slide the right hand down towards the knee as you open the left side body. Next time you inhale, come back up through the center. Exhale, left hand goes down, right arm goes up and over. Slide the left hand towards the kind of the outer knee, or maybe all the way to the knee, depending on your personal range of motion. Inhale, come back up through center. Find your upward hand pose. So feet pressed down, thighs engaged, glutes a little bit engaged, abs a little bit engaged. Breathing. And then exhale, dive forward over the legs, standing forward bend. Fold maybe a little bit deeper, maybe not. All right, kind of depends on you. Inhale, flat back chest moves forward. We're going to go back to downward dogs. Bend your knees, take the blocks off to the sides, and then walk yourself back downward facing dog. Take out 3 or 4 breaths here. If you want to start straightening your legs in down dog, that's fine. Otherwise, keep the knees nice and generously bent. All right, and then come into child's pose. So knees go wide, as not quite as wide as the sticky mat, or maybe they do. Toes together, sit the hips back. If your head can get to the ground easily, that's great. Go ahead and place your forehead on the ground. If it cannot, that's okay. You can stack fists underneath the forehead so that you bring the floor to you. You can also grab one of your blocks and place it underneath your head as well. And we'll just be here for a few breaths, letting the body have a moment just to settle. And then we'll come back up onto hands and knees. Okay, so going into plank. So if you are someone who has wrist stuff, you can grab your blocks this time on the lowest height with your fingers draping over the edge of the block. That's a really nice grounded way to do plank without so much strain on the wrists. You could also technically do this at like a kitchen counter or on a chair even, right? Um, if you are okay with hands on the floor, you can remove your blocks so that your hands are placed just in front of your shoulders. I'm not a big fan of having the shoulders right over the wrist. I think it's too much strain on most people's hands, especially with how much we use our hands for typing and technology today. So I like my hands a little bit in front. Okay, and then you're gonna extend one leg back. And before you pop yourself straight up into plank, find all of your alignment points. So hands pressing down, thigh engaged, left glute engaged, or right if you stepped your right foot back. And now, because we don't have that other leg in between your hands for low lunge, now the low belly is imperatively engaged. So when you're ready, you're gonna take a breath in, exhale, step the right foot back, and go through those things again. Hands pressed down, quads engaged, glutes engaged. That's going to push your pelvis down a little bit, but that's okay because we're looking for a straight line. Lower belly engaged. So just go through those again. Hands pressed, quads engaged, glutes engaged, abs engaged. And again, hands pressed, quads engaged, glutes engaged, abs engaged. Do one more. Hands pressed, quads engaged, glutes engaged, abs engaged, and then bring the knees down to the floor. You could rest again in child's pose. You could also rest upright, kneeling. You could rest in hands and knees. You could even go back to downward dog if you prefer, but just kind of take a few moments to breathe and notice for yourself, did those things happen relatively well together, or did you have to keep engaging them individually? All right, so let's come back into plank. Same setup, maybe step back with the opposite first. So for me, that means my right foot's going to go back first. I'm getting my hands ready, get my thigh ready, my glute ready, my abs ready. And then let's all step the left foot back to meet or the opposite foot. And so kind of go through those hands, glutes, quads, abs, but then see if that can be a loop like in the semi background. And notice, does your head feel in line with your shoulders? Feel in line with your pelvis? Feel in line with your heels? If you are on your hands or on blocks, that's a diagonal as opposed to a line parallel to the floor. And so it's a little bit trickier to feel, but you want to feel that energetically straight line from head to foot. And, if you're doing this on a computer, you could always open a Zoom window or some sort of video conferencing app and kind of check it out, or a mirror works great too. And then rest, sit back in a child's pose or just on your heels. And so there are some postures where mirrors are not as effective because it's more about what you feel as opposed to mimicking certain alignment points. Plank is one of those alignment points that getting to know what your body looks like in a straight line and being able to check yourself and your perception of that can actually be really helpful, because plank, as you've noticed, shows up in other places in yoga. It's an upward hand pose, it's in mountain pose, it's in warrior three, it's in shavasana to a certain degree, it's in push-ups or chaturanga. It's sort of all over the place. And so getting a really clear indication of what it feels like can be really helpful. And then what grows out of plank is all of your forward bends and all of your backward bends. I mean, probably all of your side bends and twists too, but in terms of engagement levels, all of your forward bends, all of your back bends grow from plank effectively. And so we're gonna do one more plank and then we'll be done with plank, right? So we're just trying to teach the body how to organize. We're not necessarily trying to exhaust the body. The strengthening comes after the organization is established. And so if you're someone who really likes to feel tired during a practice, practices like these that are breaking things down a little bit more might feel different in terms of fulfillment. But my hope is that by being really clear about the engagement, you still receive a sense of integration in your body. Okay, so coming forward, one foot back, the other foot back, plank, arms, thighs, butt, abs, breath, right? Arms, abs, thighs, butt, breath. It's kind of a nice little tongue twister. And as you get quads engaged, glutes engaged, abs engaged, and you're breathing and you're pressing your arms down, you're trying to notice, are my hips a little bit higher than my shoulders and my head? Am I sagging my hips down in a back bend? Are my knees kind of welting? Right? Is my butt sticking up even though it might be in line with my head? Right? These are all compensations I see all the time. And so that's why we're doing this, right? Head in line with shoulders, in line with hips, in line with heels, pressing with your arms, engaging the thighs, engaging the butt, engaging the abs. Okay, downward facing dog. Lift the hips, bend the knees so that it releases some of the hamstring, and press your chest back towards your thighs. Okay. And then bring your knees down to the floor. Go ahead and grab a blanket so that you can sit on it. And we're going to come into a cross-legged seat. So Sukhasana. So Sukhasana is kind of the traditional cross-legged seat where you're crossing your legs at kind of mid-shin. If you've got some knee stuff, it's sometimes helpful to get blocks and give your knees a little bit of extra support. That can feel really nice and grounding. Definitely sitting up on at least one blanket is helpful for most people, even for people who are relatively bendy. It's just architecturally kind of lovely to have just a little bit of elevation. So blocks could be underneath the knees. You don't have that's totally optional. I mean, really everything in yoga is totally optional. So, you take what you want. And then go ahead, walk your hands forward and bow the head down. If bowing the head down just does not feel like something you want to do, you could look in between the hands forward and keep the head in a little bit of engagement. That's fine. But what we're looking to do is allow the belly and the thighs to fold into one another. And now that we're not in plank, you can let the belly go, let the glutes go, and maybe start to try to find some of that easefulness of the breath again. However, forward bends are not useful for a lot of people. And so if you find yourself holding your breath here because of tension, that may mean that you've gone too far, right? And so that may mean that you want to walk your hands back up and just kind of lean forward a little bit so that you can find a little more ease in the breath as you're in this forward bend that is kind of meant to help relax your glutes a little bit. Okay, great. And then go ahead, come all the way up to sit. We're going to switch the legs because you got two legs. So the other leg is going to come in front. Again, blocks could be underneath the knees or not, up to you. Walk the hands forward as much or as little as you like. Again, you can drop the head all the way, or you can keep the head semi supported by just looking forward in between your forearms or your hands, depending on what feels good on your neck. Sorry, that's my dog. It's a problem when people open and close their trash cans next door. She thinks that that is inappropriate while she's napping. Okay, go ahead, come on up to sit. And we're gonna set up for Shavasana, right? That's our plank practice today. So couple options. You can have a blanket underneath your head, and you can do just a totally flat Shavasana if you like, laying down, legs slightly wider than hip distance, arms out to the side. Option A. Of course, you can always have your hands on your belly. Alternatively, if your lower back, especially after doing a little bit of plank work where we're sort of manipulating the lower back a bit, you could bend your knees, step your feet to the floor, and then open your knees out to the side for Supta Baddha Konasana, putting supports, blocks, or blankets underneath your knees. So again, feet together, knees apart, something underneath your knees that's symmetric on both sides so that your knees have equal support. And again, hands resting either on the belly or out to the side. We'll do a Shavasana practice for about 10 minutes, right? If you feel at all chilly, it's nice to find a blanket or an extra layer of clothing to cover with. And if you need to make adjustments at any point in time, now is really the time to make the adjustments, but you can also make adjustments whenever you need to during the Shavasana practice. And allow your eyes to either be closed or open. Take a few breaths, again, trying to let your body give into the support of the floor. And then allow the body to rest. So slowly bring your attention back to your breath. See if the breath can be easeful as it deepens. Next time you inhale, it's going to prepare the body to move. And then as you exhale, step the feet to the floor one at a time. Take another breath in. And then as you exhale, roll onto one side. Pause there for a moment as you allow your body to drop into the floor. When you're ready to come up to sit, press your hands down into the floor. Let that help you come up to a seating position. You could take a cross-legged seat on a blanket or even on a block to elevate your hips even higher if you like. And then as you arrive upright, place head over ribcage over pelvis so that you're in that linear energetic line once more. Hands could rest on the thighs. Eyes could close or they could cast down towards the floor. Take a moment just to be here for a moment in between the Shavasana and kind of getting back to daily life. And next time you inhale, bring your hands together at the center of your chest, Anjali Mudra. As you exhale, bow the face down to the fingertips, act of gratitude for taking time to practice. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be safe. Namaste.